Part 27. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 277. Mr. 7 and Ms. Father's Day were conducting reconnaissance on the roof of a nearby building. On the top of a building, Mr. 7 and Ms. Father's Day were conducting investigations here. As snipers, the two men knew the importance of investigating the battlefield environment. Mr. 7 took off the long wooden box from his back. "Okay, let's take a look at my trump card again." Ha ha ha. Mr. 7 opened the long wooden box. I saw a very long sniper rifle inside. The body of the gun is made of fine wood, and the barrel is made of long black steel. There is also a special scope above the gun body. It turns out to be another death sniper rifle. Ms said on Father's Day. Mr. 7 took out a bipod from the long wooden box. This bracket can support the Reaper sniper rifle to aim at the target. Mr. 7 set up the death sniper rifle and started aiming with the scope. The scope of the death sniper rifle is comparable to many precision telescopes. Ha ha ha. Mr. 7 said while controlling the death sniper rifle. In the scope of the death sniper rifle, the King's Palace was clearly visible. Now in the eyes of Mr. 7, you can clearly see the King's Army defenses around the King's Palace and the King's Army's artillery and machine guns above the King's Palace. Except for the King's Palace, all surrounding buildings can be scouted and targeted. The Reaper sniper rifle can kill enemies accurately from a kilometer away. Many strong men could not escape the fate of being killed by the God of Death. For Mr. 7, with the death sniper rifle in hand, it can suppress any enemy. A very powerful weapon. Ms said on Father's Day. Mr. 7 took his eyes away from the sight and said, "But any powerful weapon also has an excellent user. If it is used by me, it will be a godlike weapon in the hands of an excellent sniper." Ha ha ha. Mr. 7 has absolute confidence and can use this powerful weapon to kill any of his targets. Mr. 7 and Ms. Father's Day together are a super powerful sniper combination. They were mainly responsible for covering up the kidnapping of Cobra. Once a special situation occurs, use the long-range sniper ability to cover Mr. 4 and Ms. Merry Christmas to them. Underground near the King's Palace, Ms. Merry Christmas completely turned into a mole, digging desperately with both hands. Ms. Merry Christmas is a person with mole fruit ability. Mole Man. After she transformed into a giant mole in her animal form, she could burrow underground as powerfully as a real mole. Ms. Merry Christmas 2 giant mole paws quickly dig up the soil beneath the ground. "Huh, I'm really tired." Ms. Merry Christmas took a breath and stopped first. She uncorked the water bottle she was carrying and poured cold water into her mouth. The historic city of Aruba is built on top of huge cliffs, so the soil beneath the city is hard. Although after a long history, human activities have somewhat eroded the soil under the city, but it is still much harder than other areas. Many other cities in Alabasta are just sandy soil. "No, we have to go all out to dig holes." Ms. Merry Christmas after resting for a while, he quickly continued to work up the energy and continue digging holes. She used her claws to dig up the hard soil. If it is ordinary sand, she will dig holes in the sand and sneak as quickly as a fish. But here you have to spend some effort. After a long period of hard work, Ms. Merry Christmas finally dug to the bottom of the King's Palace. She continued digging, and with the mole man's instincts she knew where she was going. In this way, the excavation continued until the early morning of the next day, and finally the hole was dug under the political hall in the middle of the bottom of the King's Palace. Of course, she didn't dig up the top. After digging out the hard soil below, there was still a pile of bricks and stones on it. These bricks and stones cannot be excavated for the time being, and the main concern is that they will be exposed after excavation. Okay, here it is. Ms. Merry Christmas hurriedly returned through the dug passage, and finally returned to the building where Mr. 4 and the others were operating together. In the bottom room of the building is the entrance to Ms. Merry Christmas's burrow. At the entrance, Mr. 2 and Mr. 4 have been waiting for a long time. Oh, Your Majesty the Princess. We look forward to your return. Thank you so much for your hard work, Mr. 2 said very respectfully. Ms. Merry Christmas was very tired. She said, "Don't always call me Princess, Your Majesty. It's better to call me Ms. Merry Christmas." "Well, okay," Mr. 2 said politely. "Ms. Merry Christmas." I took a pot of black tea and poured it into my mouth. "Okay, just go there when the time comes. But there are still a few bricks on top. I can't break through it yet, so it will be exposed. When the time comes, I will break through the last bricks," Ms. Merry Christmas said. Mr. 2 said, "Thank you for your hard work, go and have a rest." Ms. Merry Christmas swayed away from here. "I'm going to find a room and have a good sleep," Ms. said Merry Christmas. After a tiring night of digging underground, Ms. Merry Christmas needs a good rest. After Ms. Merry Christmas went to rest, Mr. 2 looked towards the passage. From here is the meeting hall leading to the king's palace. There, the hijacking of Cobra can be completed. And Mr. 2 can conclude that the sincere king will definitely go there to attend the meeting. This is really an anticipated operation. But it is only early in the morning and it will take until 12 o'clock in the evening. The slave family must also be well prepared, Mr. 2 said. Mr. 4 and Lisa looked dully at the entrance of the cave. Time passed by minute by minute. The sky turned dark again. Inside the king's palace, Cobra walked to the passage on the first floor alone. At last he came to a door. Here is the conference hall where political affairs are handled on weekdays. There were 2 armed guards on both sides of the meeting hall. "You guys should go first. I want to be alone for a while," Cobra said. The 2 guards looked at each other for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, this is an extraordinary period. Mr. Jaka ordered us to strictly guard this place. We dare not." "Just say it's my order," Cobra said. The king persisted in this way, and the guards dared not disobey. "Yes, Your Majesty." The 2 guards retreated immediately. Cobra pushed his hands toward the door. Crunch. Accompanied by a long sound of metal friction, the door was pushed open. The chandelier above is still brightly lit. In front of it is a large red carpet. In the past, ministers would discuss affairs in 2 rows here. At the end of the red carpet opposite the door is the solemn throne. Cobra sat there, discussing state affairs with the ministers on the red carpet. However, at 12 o'clock tonight, here is the agreed negotiation with Kosha. Cobra closed the door, and walked forward slowly from the red carpet. At last he reached the familiar solemn throne. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 278. Cobra sat on the throne. Looking at the red carpet in front of him, it reminded him of the past. Back then, Kosha was met by Cobra when he was a child. At that time, the childish Kosa had a sunny face. On this red carpet, I was very motivated to talk to Cobra on the throne about how to build a great Alabasta. Although the Kosha people are young, they have a different perspective in their hearts. At a young age, he proposed to build 100 new oasis cities in Alabasta. More ports must be built. Even King's New Port in the southwest of Alabasta was decided to build by Cobra and the ministers under the inspiration of Kosha. Sure enough, that port was able to compete with Rapeseed Port later. "Kusa, you are amazing. The kingdom needs more children like you as hope." Cobra once spoke highly of Kosa like this. "Your Majesty, I must fulfill this ambition. Build Alabasta even greater. These leaders need a core figure, so it's all up to you. Your Majesty, please don't let me down," Kosha at that time said with an expression asking Cobra to promise. "Okay, I promise you," Cobra said sincerely. Now on the throne, in retrospect that was at least 10 years ago. But after so many years, everything is different. On the throne, Cobra looked at the clock on the wall. The bell showed that it was already 11 in the evening. In 30 minutes it will be the appointed time. The conversation in the hanging garden yesterday was definitely not an illusion. Kusa will definitely negotiate with him again on time. Deal with crocodile together. This is where Kosa gave Cobra the greatest trust yesterday. Cobra knew very well that Kosa was a man who loved Alabasta at heart. Crocodile has committed crimes, and Kosa must have hated him to the bone. So teaming up is definitely a decision Kosa will make. But thinking of this, Cobra suddenly had an inexplicable doubt in his mind. Since Kosa was assassinated before and survived, the rebel army was torn apart. Why did Kosa let things go like this? The rebel army is also Kosa's brainchild. Could it be that this was to confuse Crocodile? This made Cobra a little uneasy. But when the time comes, the truth will definitely come out together. With deep anxiety and anticipation, Cobra waited for the time to approach every minute. The time of the hanging clock on the wall is constantly approaching the direction of 12 o'clock. In the end, the hand really pointed to 12 o'clock. Cobra looked around. During this moment, he wondered if Kosa couldn't come. But on the red carpet in front of him, there was a sound, the ground cracked, and the masonry was broken. Two figures rushed out. Cobra hastily covered his body with his hands. When he put his hand down, two figures stood in front of him. One was very squat, almost like a mole or a giant mole. Like a mole and like an old woman. Those hands were like giant mole paws. The other was tall, thin, and slender. Wearing a pink coat with heavy makeup on her face. It's a she-male who is neither male nor female. Who are you? Cobra asked. The mole-like old woman made no reply. The tall ladyboy looked at him mockingly. Your Majesty the King, I have kept you waiting for a long time. No, strictly speaking, I am also punctual, Mr. Tu said. Cobra's heart was cold when he heard this sentence. You said you were punctual. Could it be that you? Cobra was out of breath. Mr. Tu winked, touched his face with his right hand, and continued, Yes, yes, I am the leader of the rebel army that you saw yesterday. As he spoke, Mr. Tu's face and body changed, and even his voice began to change. Cobra's face turned pale. Mr. Tu eventually became Kosa. I am Kosa, please don't be surprised, Your Majesty. There are some unbelievable things in this world, Mr. Tu said. Cobra was so angry and surprised that he fell off the throne. He gritted his teeth and pointed at the Kosa that Mr. Tu had become. How dare you turn into a dead person to lie to me? Cobra said angrily. The Kosa transformed by Mr. Tu is very calm, but still imitates Kosa in temperament. The sound is exactly the same. Your Majesty, do you really believe that a person who must die will survive? Kosa was assassinated by the ace sniper of our Baroque studio. And I was the commander-in-chief of that operation, Mr. Tu said naturally. When Cobra heard this, he felt as if he was stunned by thunder, and he could hardly hold on. It's hateful. After Cobra spit out these words, he fainted from anger. Ms. Merry Christmas looked at Cobra lying on the ground and said, It's really useless. Okay, take him away quickly. Then blow up the tunnel entrance, Mr. Tu said. Mr. Tu touched his face with his left hand and quickly changed from the Kosa appearance back to his normal appearance. He tied Kosa with a rope and carried it on his shoulders. Ms. Merry Christmas quickly planted explosives and timing devices here. Mr. Tu and Ms. Merry Christmas took Cobra and escaped from the tunnel. Meanwhile, outside the king's palace, Mr. 4 was in an alleyway, where he took out his pocket watch and checked the time. The time above is 5 minutes past 12 o'clock at night. Now is the time to act. Mr. 4 takes off the gun barrel on the back. The barrel quickly grew limbs, and the muzzle became a head. This is his pet dog Rasu. Rasu is actually a gun, but after eating the dog fruit, it becomes a dachshund. Weapons are able to eat devil fruit, which is almost unprecedented in the world. But there is such a great scientist who developed this technology. Mr. 4 accidentally obtained a canine fruit in the shape of a dachshund. After eating his favorite gun, he can be turned into a dachshund. Although it has become a dachshund, it still maintains some characteristics of the original firearm. It's just because it's too big, it looks like a cannon. Mr. 4 said hesitantly, "La. So, it's, we, on the field." Lesu simply shouted, "Woof." Mr. 4 took off a thick bat from his back. The bat is marked with 4T. It's a 4-ton metal bat. Rasu opened the dog's mouth and spit out a cannonball. Mr. 4 swung a 4-ton bat and knocked the shell away like a baseball. Clang! The shells flew towards the sandbag fortifications in front of the king's palace. The shell hit heavily and hit a fortification. The king's army was terrified when they saw the shell. Cannonball! The king's army quickly got down. However, the shell did not explode. Then the king's army stood up again and approached the cannonball carefully. Why can't it be a shot put? If it was a cannonball, how could there be no sound of cannon firing? Just when the king's army was puzzled, suddenly the shell exploded. Mr. 4 and Rasu, who were in the distant alleyway, looked at the explosion of fire from the sandbag fortifications in front of the palace. The cannonball that Rasu spit out looks like the cannonball can actually be timed to explode. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 279. Mr. 4 looked at the explosion, then looked at La Su, and said slowly with some joy, "It's good." Rasu shouted, "Woof." Rasu opened his mouth again, and started to spit out the shells. Mr. 4 lifts a 4-ton metal bat. Rasu opened his mouth and spit out 3 cannonballs in succession. All 3 shells flew towards Mr. 4. The metal bat wielded by Mr. 4 swung out violently as the cannonball approached. 3 consecutive sticks knocked away 3 cannonballs. These 3 shells all flew very far, they were 3 home runs. The 3 shells all flew towards the sandbag fortifications in front of the king's palace. There were 3 violent explosions, and more than 10 people were killed or injured by the king's army. Mr. 4 observed the king's palace and said slowly, "Not enough." It was here that Mr. 4 and Rasu attacked the king's palace in order to contain and attract the king's army. Because at this time Mr. 2 and the others are kidnapping Cobra. Here, the energy of the king's army can be restrained, lest they possibly hinder Mr. 2's actions. Rasu understood what Mr. 4 meant. This time, Lesu pressed his 4 feet on the ground very hard, and opened his mouth wide. Cannonballs were fired one by one. Explosive barrage. Mr. 4 quickly waved the metal bat in his hand. During the battle, his whole body became extremely fast. With the waving of the metal bat in his hand, the cannonballs were blown away one by one. These shells crashed in front of the king's palace. Boom 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 boom. The front of the king's palace turned into a sea of flames, as if being bombarded by dozens of cannons. Mr. 4 knocked away all 36 shells spit out by Rasu before stopping his swing. The front of the king's palace was already a mess by bombing. The king's army suffered heavy losses and urgently called for emergency support. After Mr. 4 carried out this round of violent attacks, he took out another pizza that he had brought with him. He split the pizza in half and stuffed half of it into his mouth. Feed the other half to Rasu. Wait, next, and then, come, some, awesome. Mr. 4 said slowly. Lazuli tastes like pizza. After a while of rest, they will carry out a more violent attack. Inside the king's palace, everyone heard the explosion from outside the palace. In the bedroom on the 10th floor, Nami jumped up from the bed in shock. "Oh my God, What's going on? Nami quickly put on her clothes and prepared to flee. When she rushed out of the room, she was bumped into by Wei rushing towards her. It hurt so much Nami was knocked to the ground, covered her head and stood up again. Sorry, Vivi said. Nami asked, what's going on? It seems that someone is attacking here, Wei said. Suddenly a figure rushed over. Two beauties, are you okay? The person who rushed over was none other than Sanji. Wei looked at Sanji and said, Sanji, it seems that someone is attacking here. Sanji said, I know this, but since it is so late to attack here, it must be those guys, that is, the Baroque studio. Wei, we must hurry to find your father. Wei's face was very ugly, and she said, yes. We must find Father Wan quickly. Vivi, Nami, and Sanji hurried to the bedroom where Cobra slept. But when he reached the door of the bedroom, he rushed in and found that there was no one there. Could it be that it's in the study room? Wei quickly changed direction. The three of them went to the study together, but Cobra was still not found. With anxiety, Vivi rushed to the first floor of the king's palace together with Sanji and Nami. Here the three of them came down the stairs and first arrived in a courtyard. This courtyard is open air and has many dining tables. It is used when ministers and foreign guests gather together. All of a sudden, a cannonball was seen flying across the night sky. Be careful, Sanji quickly hugged Vivi and Nami and jumped to a place more than 10 meters away. The shell hit the courtyard ground and exploded violently. It's scary, Nami said with lingering fear after seeing the explosion where she was just now. Wei quickly said, Sanji, thank you. Is it just someone shelling this place? Sanji suddenly looked happy and said, thank you, this is what I should do. But then he became serious again. A few more artillery shells came. It must be an unusual heavy artillery that can shoot so high. And there are at least dozens of them. But the king's army should have strictly sealed off the surrounding area. How could it be in the city? Who can have more than this many heavy artillery? Sanji said doubtfully. More than a dozen shells flew across the night sky in succession. The courtyard was filled with fire and smoke. At this time, Nami said with fear and half-jokingly, it's like hitting a baseball, of course it's a joke. Wei looked towards the courtyard and said, no matter what, it's already very unsafe here. Cannonballs continued to fly across the night sky. Wei suddenly remembered something and said, let's go there quickly. Do you remember the political hall? Go there, okay, Sanji said. It's scary, Nami said with tears streaming down her face. The three of them rushed across the courtyard and quickly rushed to the political hall through a corridor while there were fewer shells flying over. Arriving at the door of the council hall, Sanji kicked the door open with one kick. After rushing into the political hall, there was no one there. What made the three of them feel extremely uneasy for a while was that a big hole was actually opened on the ground. There is also a seal of the royal family of Alabasta on the side of the big hole. Vivi and Sanji recognized it at first glance, it was the one that Cobra had carried before. Could it be that? Sanji said. The king is. Nami also said with an ugly face. Father, Wei quickly rushed to the breached hole and shouted. Below is a dark cave. Don't know where it leads. Sanji looked at the cave and then at the seal on the ground. There is no doubt that Cobra was kidnapped. Wei was about to go down to search. But Sanji, who was about to follow up, suddenly heard a ticking sound. This is a timing mechanism similar to a clock. It's even a ticking time bomb. Danger! Sanji immediately caught Vivi. When the three of them looked closely, they saw several bombs in the cave. These were spherical black bombs, and there was a ticking sound coming from inside. Nami almost fainted when she saw it. Sanji immediately turned his gaze to the throne. He rushed over and kicked the throne towards the window on the side. Be careful! Sanji quickly hugged Nami and Vivi and rushed out. Just as he jumped out of the window, there was an astonishing explosion behind him. The power of the explosion was huge. Not only did it cover the entire meeting hall, the impact of the explosion rushed out of the windows and even shattered part of the wall. The building of this king's palace is quite strong, but the power of those bombs is even greater. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 281. It's so tiring, Ms. Merry Christmas said. Ms. Merry Christmas turned her head and saw that Mr. 2 had already placed the unconscious King Cobra on a chair. Mr. 2 found a bottle of water and took a gulp of it. After finishing the drink, Mr. 2 took a deep breath. The slave family is really exhausted. Finally, we got His Majesty the King here, Mr. 2 said. Ms. Merry Christmas is also sitting on a chair. Okay, now we should find a way to get him out of Aruba, Ms. said Merry Christmas. The two looked at the fainted cobra, who was still in a coma. The next most important thing is to find a way to get Cobra out of Arubana. After a while, Mr. 4 also ran back panting. Mr. 4 entered the room and saw Cobra, who had been kidnapped. It's done, it's done, Mr. 4 said slowly. Mr. 4 then went to a table in the room and poured a bottle of apple tea into his mouth. Then he found a piece of pizza from a box and began to munch and swallow. After eating and drinking for a while, Mr. 4, who had recovered, was also sitting on a chair. For the trio, it's a big hit right now. But what is needed at this time is to quickly transfer Cobra. Ms. Merry Christmas looked at Cobra, who was already unconscious. Okay, put Cobra into a barrel. Let's pretend to be a carriage pulling goods and leave the city quickly, Ms. said Merry Christmas. Mr. 2 quickly found a wooden barrel, picked up the unconscious Cobra and put him into the barrel. Okay, get on the carriage quickly, Mr. 2 said. Ms. Merry Christmas looked at Mr. 4 and said, okay, you come and carry the barrel. Don't break it. Mr. 4 stood up slowly, looked at the barrel containing Cobra, and said slowly, okay. Mr. 4 picked up the barrel. Ms. Merry Christmas and hurry out with Mr. 2. Next to the building, there was already a carriage ready for delivery. Mr. 2 touched his face with his right hand and quickly transformed his face into that of a middle-aged man. After being disguised, Mr. 2 quickly jumped into the driving seat of the carriage and prepared to leave. Ms. Merry Christmas and Mr. 4 hid in the cargo box of the carriage. Okay, you're ready to go, Ms. said Merry Christmas. Okay, let's begin. Mr. 2 turned into a groom and drove the carriage and started walking. While the carriage was moving, Ms. Merry Christmas inside the carriage also took out a telephone bug. Hello, Mr. 7 and Ms. Father's Day, Ms. said Merry Christmas. Ms. Merry Christmas, sir. We are on standby. Gwigwigwa, Ms. Father's Day said to the other side of the phone bug. Now the carriage has started to leave here. You must take cover and observe the situation around us in time, Ms. Merry Christmas said. Yes, Ms. Merry Christmas. Gwigwigwa said the other side. Ms. Merry Christmas hung up phone bug. She dialed the phone to a new number. Hey, are you the boss? Ms. said Merry Christmas. The other side was silent at first, and then there was a low voice for a while. It's me, how's it going? Ms. Merry Christmas said respectfully, we are done. Now we are heading towards the abandoned town southeast of Arupana. Okay, good job. Don't worry, just bring him steadily. Crocodile's tone on the opposite side became a little satisfied. Yes, boss, said Ms. Merry Christmas. Now take Cobra to an abandoned town in the southeast of Arubana no matter what. The Mr. 2 driving a carriage is very natural. No one would realize that this ordinary-looking middle-aged man turned out to be a Baroque studio agent. When this extremely important carriage began to leave the city without anyone noticing. On top of a tall building. Mr. 7 and Ms. Merry Christmas are observing and secretly protecting the carriage. Looks like they succeeded. Gwigwigwa, Ms. Father's Day said. As long as this carriage can leave here, we will have completed our mission. Ha ha ha, Mr. 7 said. Mr. 7 uses the scope of the Death Sniper rifle to observe the situation around the carriage at all times. Everything is safe now. In this night, and when the king's palace was attacked. It can almost be concluded that the king's army didn't notice this ordinary carriage at all. But whether it was Mr. 2 and Ms. Merry Christmas, or Mr. 7 and Ms. Father's Day, they never expected that a force was targeting them. In the city under the night. The carriage kept going. In order not to arouse suspicion, the speed is also kept normal. However, in the nearby alleys, several figures were constantly using the darkness as a cover to track them down. One of them was a burly man with a beard, and he observed the carriage with eyes like a sharp sword. "Hello, Chief Furox," the big man dialed the phone bug that he carried with him. From the opposite side came the somewhat bureaucratic voice of Fox. "What's wrong, Zaros?" CP3 Officer Flox's voice sounded. The burly agent named Zaros continued, "Sir, we just found out that the king's palace was attacked. It was a fat man and a strange dog. We tracked them down after they finished attacking. Finally they entered a building. Then 2 more people came out of the building. A total of 3 people got into a carriage together, and seemed to be away from the city." Folox was silent for a while, and then hurriedly said, "I also saw the king's palace being attacked. It's too suspicious that he actually rode in this carriage together. Go and stop it immediately." "As you command, sir," Zaros said. Zaros then waved his hand and signaled to the people together, and then began to intercept the operation. A total of 6 people, including Zaros, threw up their cloaks together. CP3's black agent uniform was revealed underneath. At this moment, Zaros' burly body began to step on the ground with an astonishing speed. Shave. Zaros' body disappeared instantly, and then he appeared about 10 meters ahead. Continuing in this way, Zaros' body continued to move forward rapidly. In addition to Zaros, the other 5 agents also stepped on the ground quickly with their feet. Their bodies also seemed to disappear, and quickly appeared in front of them 10 meters away. 6 CP3 agents pursued the carriage ahead at an alarming speed. This is one of the legendary 6 abilities, acquired through long and hard training. Shaving is a quick movement of the body, but it makes it look like it disappears and then reappears. Mr. 2, who was driving the carriage, had a calm expression at this time, and of course he was always observing his surroundings. Suddenly there was a sound of the air being torn apart, like the sound of wind. A ghostly figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 282. Mr. 2 was shocked. My spine even felt a little chilly. When he wanted to take another look, the figure disappeared in an instant. Hallucination, Mr. 2 said in shock. But immediately the figure was already at the top, and kicked it over. Mr. 2 quickly moved his hand to the left side of his face and quickly changed back to his original appearance. Watch out! Mr. 2's left foot kicked upwards violently. The feet of the 2 are together. But the Mr. 2, which is at the bottom and rear in terms of strength, is even more powerful. This kick caused Mr. 2 and CP3 agents to fall from the carriage onto the street nearby. Mr. 2 steadied his body and saw that it was a burly man in a black suit. But the man's black suit bears the world government logo. Ah, the slave family knows. It turns out that you are from the world government. I also heard that the world government has an intelligence agency to inquire about our information. It seems that we have been targeted by you, Mr. 2 suddenly realized said. It's good to know this agent is Zaros. Mr. 2 looked around. 5 more figures quickly rushed over. Surround the carriage. A total of 6 people were all wearing black suits. It has the world government logo on it. 6 people. They still have some skills. Unfortunately, now is not the time to fight, Mr. 2 said. You are indeed from the Baroque studio. Sure enough, you have done some shady things, Zaros said. Mr. 2 looked at him, winked and said, you have seen through. Forget it, let me introduce myself. I am Mr. 2, the most powerful agent in Baroque Studio. Please introduce me too. Zaros said, it seems that I have met a master. But I can only speed you up. We are CP3, the intelligence agency of the world government. Mr. 2 looked at the burly agent and said, CP3, you are agents of the world government. No wonder you were able to discover us. Zaros looked at Mr. 2 again and winked at the others. I can give you a chance to surrender. That way you will be punished lightly in the future. There are still 2 people in the carriage. Ask them to come out and surrender as well, Zaros said. After hearing this, Mr. 2 said angrily, surrender and dream. At this time, 2 CP3 agents suddenly appeared from the left and right sides of Mr. 2. After they approached, they shot out with both hands. Mr. 2 also responds quickly. The other party approached so suddenly, he quickly fell down and his legs fell up quickly. Shemale boxing technique. Handstand spin. Mr. 2 stood on his head and kicked around for a while. 2 CP3 agents were kicked and flew to the side. But after all, they were specially trained agents, and they quickly turned somersaults and stood up again. Zaros's eyes also became serious. Mr. 2 was more difficult to deal with than he thought. Mr. 2 quickly somersaulted and stood upright. It's 100 years too early to attack me secretly, Mr. 2 clapped his hands and said. Zaros winked at the other 3 agents. The 3 agents quickly rushed towards the carriage compartment. The 3 agents swung their feet and kicked the carriage violently. The carriage compartment was destroyed under tremendous force. After Mr. 2 saw it, he became anxious for a while. Princess, Mr. 2 shouted. After the carriage was torn apart, only the huge body of Mr. 4 was seen lying on the ground. Ah! Mr. 4 slowly raised his body and looked around. Stupid pig, you are about to crush me to death, why don't you get up quickly? MS Merry Christmas shouted. Mr. 4 quickly stood up and hugged the barrel containing Cobra tightly in his hands. And MS Merry Christmas. MS after Merry Christmas is put down, quickly check the barrel. The barrel is still intact. Who are these people? MS Merry Christmas said, looking around. Mr. 2 quickly said, Princess, just be okay. And these are agents of the world government. MS Merry Christmas looked at the 6 agents in black around her and said, what, agents of the world government? After confirming the 3 of them, Zaros looked at the barrel held by Mr. 4. It seems that you are in a hurry to go out, Zaros said. MS Merry Christmas yelled at Zaros angrily, yes. We are going to get the stinky king in the barrel out of the city. Suddenly he was attacked by you guys. You spilled the beans, Mr. 2 said angrily. MS Merry Christmas noticed immediately and quickly covered her mouth. But it was too late, Zaros looked at them very seriously. What king is in that barrel? Is it King Cobra? Zaros asked seriously. No, 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 it's definitely not King Cobra. How can we go deep into the palace and kidnap him? Mr. 2 said quickly. Zaros is also surprised now. Although it was known before that the goal of Baroque Studios was to hijack or kill Cobra. But there is no evidence that the king's palace was invaded from the outside. It's useless to say anything now, the top priority is to seize the barrel. Okay, stop quibbling. Give us the barrel first, Zaros said seriously. At this time, his eyes were like wolves, with an aura that had been lurking in the darkness for a long time. Anyone who sees him like this will be intimidated by his aura. Mr. 2 looked around. Now there are 6 people on the other side, all of whom are capable. Even if the 3 of them can beat their opponents. But fighting here will inevitably delay time, and may attract more troublesome enemies. Okay, MS Merry Christmas. Is that wooden barrel? Mr. 2 said, pretending to be relaxed. Absolutely cannot be handed over. Mr. Two's body jumped up quickly and rolled in mid-air. Ballet boxing. Memoirs of that summer. Mr. Two's body seemed to be dancing in mid-air, and then quickly rotated and rolled to attack the three people closest to Mr. 4. Dong dong dong. All three CP3 agents were kicked down. After Mr. 2 completed its attack, it fell in front of MS. Merry Christmas and Mr. 4. You guys take the barrel and leave quickly, Mr. 2 said. It is good. There is no room for nonsense now, Mr. 4 and MS. Merry Christmas and run away. Mr. 2 is holding back these agents. Don't even think about escaping. Zaros quickly moved in front of MS. Merry Christmas. There are also two CP3 agents who use Shao to block the way of Mr. 4 and MS. Merry Christmas. At this moment, a fire suddenly flashed from the top of a building in the distance. A bullet passed through the chest of a CP3 agent. Zaros and another agent were also shocked to see blood bursting out of the agent's chest and falling to the ground. MS. Merry Christmas glanced at the top of the building. Sure enough, at this critical moment, support from Mr. 7 and others came. Long-range sniping can greatly suppress the enemy. Run quickly. MS. Merry Christmas, please call Mr. Point 4 and run together. Mr. 4 may not look fat, but he can still run very fast in this situation. Because Zaros and the others were suppressed by sniper rifles, they had to pay attention to avoid them for the time being. Zaros carefully observed the top of the building where the bullet had just been fired. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 283. Sniper Zaros thought it was bad now. However, the opponent's level is also high enough, and he can actually snipe with such accuracy in this dark night. And there is also the obstacle of Mr. 2. Okay, you three go after the guy with the barrel. You go and kill the sniper on the top of the building. I'll deal with this ladyboy wearing makeup, Zaros said quickly and decisively. Yes, said the remaining CP3 agents. The three agents who originally fought with Mr. 2 quickly chased Mr. 4 and the others. Another goes to attack the sniper on top of the building. Zaros fought with Mr. 2. These CP3 agents are also the elite of the entire CP3. Quickly take advantage of shaving and move quickly. The three men quickly chased Mr. 4 and them. One rushed towards the building where the sniper was just now. Zaros quickly fought with Mr. 2. Mr. 2 immediately shouted when he saw the CP3 agents taking action again. Hey, cowards! Do you want to run away? Mr. 2 shouted angrily. I will be your opponent, Zaros said, standing in front of him. Mr. 2 raised his fist and said, okay, I want you to be beaten into a meat pie. The two started fighting. Mr. 7, who was on the top of the building taking sniper cover, and MS Father's Day paid close attention to Mr. 4. How's it going? MS said on Father's Day. Now Mr. 2 is fighting an enemy agent. However, Mr. 4 and MS Merry Christmas are being chased by three enemies. These enemies actually reappeared as if they disappeared. Ha ha ha, Mr. 7 aimed through Jing said after observing the situation. Mr. 7 was very surprised that these enemies could appear again at a certain distance ahead as if they suddenly disappeared. But it can also be judged that they are very nervous when Mr. 4 appears. The priority must be to kill the pursuers behind Mr. 4 and MS. Merry Christmas. Mr. 7 used the death sniper rifle to target the three agents chasing behind Mr. 4. But they quickly disappeared and moved about 10 meters forward. Although it is very difficult now, it is also possible to attack by predicting the route. After confirming the opponent's use of shave many times, Mr. 7 aimed at a location. He pulled the trigger and the bullet fired. The agent happened to move there and was penetrated by a bullet fired from behind. The agent fell to the ground. The two spies had no time to think about anything else, so they could only continue to pursue. Success, Gwagwagwa MS said happily on Father's Day. Mr. 7 took a deep breath and said, "There are two more. Ha ha ha." He could also kill the two agents by anticipating. At this time, the CP3 agent who was responsible for annihilating the snipers had already arrived under this building. Just in time. The agent stomped on the ground with both feet, but more sharply, and ended up jumping in mid-air. His body flew up and flew into the air more than 10 meters high. Moon step. The CP3 agent moved his feet again at high speed in the air. But this time he stepped on nothing but air. Under his powerful and quick movement of his feet, he actually used the air as a springboard to fly to a higher position again. There was only the sound of the air being broken by a huge force for a while in the air. This CP3 agent rose rapidly several times in a row. It's like walking a ladder in the air. In the end, all of them quickly flew to the top of the building. I saw this flying agent on the top of the building on Father's Day. What? Gwagwagwa. Father's Day quickly pulled out a pistol from his waist. This pistol has a frog-like decoration on it. Seeing that the situation was not good, the CP3 agent quickly reached the top of the building in one step. Bang bang. Two shots failed on Father's Day. Shave. CP3 agent has moved to the left side of Father's Day. Father's Day quickly turned the gun over. The middle finger and index finger of CP3 agent's right hand are held together like a pistol. Finger gun. Boom. CP3 agent's fingers have already dug into MS's temple on Father's Day. Father's Day's pistol was also aimed at his heart and shot. The shot struck him in the heart. Body collapsed on Father's Day. You lose. Agent CP3 said. He quickly rushed towards Mr. 7 who was operating the death sniper rifle. Mr. 7 was knocked down with one punch. He jerked a well-made pistol from his waist. But the agent had already grabbed his wrist. Ah! Mr. 7 shouted in pain. His wrist was almost broken, and the gun in his hand fell off. The CP3 agent looked at him with extremely cold eyes. "You're not dead yet," Mr. 7 said in shock. The agent opened his clothes and found a protective gear made of thin steel plates. There is a sunken crater in the heart above. "Thanks to this thing, I was able to save my life," CP3 agent said. Mr. 7 glanced at Father's Day who was lying on the ground with eyes closed. The sweet sniper lost his life at the moment with empty eyes. Mr. 7 looked at the CP3 agent. "Do you think snipers only have bullets?" Mr. 7 asked. Agent CP3 looked at Mr. 7 and raised his left hand. After opening it, there was a grenade inside. Oops. There was a bang. A violent explosion covered two people. Finally, on the top of the building, 3 corpses were lying here. Mr. 7 and the agent were also blown to pieces. That agent has mastered the 3 abilities of shaving, moon step, and pointing gun proficiently. But the life-saving piece of iron has not been learned. Without the sniper cover of Mr. 7, Mr. 4 and MS Merry Christmas face 2 CP3 agents. The 2 CP3 agents were in hot pursuit. Although Mr. 4 and MS are running wildly with a Merry Christmas. But the 2 CP3 agents shaved faster. They quickly closed the distance. Mr. 4 was breathing heavily from exhaustion. MS Merry Christmas, I am also tired and panting constantly. I didn't expect you to run so fast. MS Merry Christmas did not forget to say at this time. Mr. 4 just hugged the barrel containing Cobra and ran away. Hurry up and don't let them get away. The 2 CP3 agents were already running to catch up with them. But their targets are all Mr. 4, because Mr. 4 hugged the barrel. Both of them caught up with Mr. 4 who was running hard. Finger gun. The 2 men hit Mr. 4 hard on the back with their finger guns at the same time. Mr. 4's back felt like he had been hit by 2 bullets at close range. He felt a sharp pain in his back. The two agents withdrew their fingers after attacking them. An astonishing amount of blood spurted out from two bloody holes on Mr. Four's back. What? Mr. Four roared like a killing pig. He turned around angrily and stopped running. Ms. Merry Christmas ran for more than 10 meters and then stopped. The two CP3 agents looked at each other after seeing Mr. Point Four stop. "Give us the barrel," said an agent. At this time, Mr. Four's expression became extremely angry. He hugged the barrel tightly with his left arm. "Take the baseball bat off your back with your right arm. Don't think about it." Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 284. Mr. Four's bat struck the two CP3 agents with great force of anger. The two CP3 agents quickly dodged with their shavers. This time they appeared on the left and right sides of Mr. Four again. Finger gun. The left and right finger guns hit Mr. Four's left and right body respectively. Mr. Four felt severe pain again, and he was swinging the 4-ton baseball bat in his hand crazily. However, the two CP3 agents were very flexible and made full use of their razors to avoid attacks. You swing the bat very fast, but your size limits your ability to fight in close quarters, an agent said while dodging. The two agents attacked Mr. Four's body 7 times in a row. Mr. Four was covered in blood. But after all, his body is burly and fat, and he can still withstand these attacks. A CP3 agent was about to attack Mr. Four from the left side. His finger gun also hit Mr. Four on the left side of his body. Mr. Four shouted in pain. But at this moment, when the CP3 agent wanted to leave, he found that he could not move his feet. He looks down. "I saw a pair of huge mole-like claws grabbing his feet." "What?" The CP3 agent saw what looked like a mole grabbing his feet. "Just change the MS that is being chased. Merry Christmas." At this time Ms. Merry Christmas looked proud. "I forgot, there are only 2 of you. Why should we run away?" Ms. Merry Christmas said. The immobile CP3 agent, whose feet were grabbed, raised his head. I saw Mr. Four looking at him with extreme hatred. Mr. Four raised the baseball bat high. "Break you." Mr. Four held the 4-ton baseball bat in his hand and pressed the button. There was a harsh metal rubbing sound. A group of spikes popped out from the side of the metal bat. The bat instantly transformed into a mace. This is the mechanism of the Mr. Four metal bat weapon, which can be turned into a mace to enhance fighting ability. Don't want. The mace bat in Mr. Four's hand has already been knocked off. Boom. With a sound that echoed through the night sky, the CP3 agent flew out. Blood is also scattered all over the sky. His body flew to a non-lethal place and fell down. And never got up again. Finally got a breath of bad breath. Mr. Four said. Just now, he was beaten by CP3 agents using finger guns and flexible fighting, leaving him unable to fight back. The bat just now seemed to blow a bloody baseball into the air. After beating the CP3 agent away, Mr. Four and Ms. Merry Christmas only have one CP3 agent as the enemy. The two of them looked at the last CP3 agent with murderous eyes. How could this be? The CP3 agent felt that he was now at an absolute disadvantage. Obviously Ms. Merry Christmas can dig a hole in the ground and completely make his shave useless. Now there is only another way to try to seize the barrel. Moon step. This CP3 agent moves his legs and flies around in the air as if he is walking on air. Only the sound of the air being broken by force remained for a while. Ms. Merry Christmas looking at the CP3 agent flying in the air. There is such a ability in this world, Ms. Merry Christmas said in shock. Mr. Four took out the rasout from his back again. The cannon dog looked at the CP3 agent in the air with the same hatred as its owner. "Laissez, use the hardest cannonballs to burn the cannonballs," Mr. Four said with hatred. "Ow!" Rasout turned his head towards Mr. Four angrily. This time his body prepared for a while, and a red cannonball shot out from his mouth. Mr. 4 swung the mace bat and knocked the cannonball away. The shells are shot away very quickly, and even the CP3 agents in the air must be careful. He opened the distance with moon steps. But the red cannonball that missed a few meters away from him suddenly flashed. A burst of flames exploded, lighting up the sky. What? The CP3 agent screamed and lost his balance, unable to maintain it with his moon steps. Fall down. But it's not over yet. When he fell down, Mr. 4's mace bat was already waiting below. At the last moment of his life, he saw a mace bat hit his head. The huge force along with the sharp spikes shattered his skull. After dying on the spot, the body of the CP3 agent flew out with blood and flames for a long time and landed on the streets of the city. Mr. 4 looked at the flames dissipating in the air. I finally felt disgusted, Mr. 4 said. At this time, Ms. Merry Christmas also quickly responded. Okay, the fighting here has caused such a big noise. We need to get out of here quickly, Ms. Merry Christmas said. Mr. 4's face also returned to its silly look after taking revenge. Okay. Mr. 4 puts the rasu and the bat back on his back. He picked up the barrel containing Cobra and quickly left the city of Arapena with Ms. Merry Christmas. When Mr. 4 and Ms. Merry Christmas successfully defeated the CP3 agents, Mr. 2 was in a fierce battle with Zaros. On the street, two people met with fists and kicks. It was very fierce. Shemale boxing technique. Shemale sword. Mr. 2's leg kicked towards Zaros. Zaros slammed his arm to block. But the opponent's strength was astonishing, like a broadsword. Zaros' body suddenly retreated several meters away. Zaros looked at this tall and thin transvestite, who seemed slender, but it's powerful and surprisingly fast. After some close combat, he was defeated steadily. Asshole, why didn't you come? Mr. 2 said provocatively. At the same time, he assumed a fighting posture of using both hands and feet. Zaros clenched his fist, and then his feet suddenly and quickly continued to step on the ground. In less than a second, there were dozens of tramples on the ground. Zaros' burly body also disappeared in front of him. Mr. 2 observed the surroundings carefully with both eyes. The ears are also constantly listening to the sounds around us. The secret of shemale boxing is to see with your eyes and listen to all directions. As soon as Mr. 2 finished speaking, his body twisted flexibly like a snake, and his hands and arms quickly grabbed a fist coming from behind. Zaros' face immediately became ugly, and his right fist was caught by the opponent. Mr. 2's eyes showed a bit of pride. This isn't over yet. Shemale leg cannon. Mr. 2's right leg was kicked upwards from below. Zaros could only see the opponent's leg kicking him in a straight line head-on. Boom. Zaros' burly body flew out like a cannonball. It fell to the ground more than 10 meters away. This burly man has been firmly suppressed by Mr. 2 from the beginning of the war until now. Hateful. Zaros struggled to get up. He spat on the ground, and 4 teeth fell out. Mr. 2's shemale boxing technique made it impossible for him, who had been practicing fighting since childhood, to parry. He never expected that Mr. 2 was not only more powerful than he expected, but also much more powerful. The burly man stood up, and he took off the black suit jacket on his upper body. The white shirt inside was exposed. Mr. 2 looked at Zaros and said, "Keep fighting, coward." Zaros' face became much more fierce. "You will die miserably soon. I will suffer a loss if I fight you on the ground, so I have a better way," Zaros said. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 285. Mr. 2 had a suspicious expression on his face. Zaros continued to step on the ground dozens of times with his feet. Then his body disappeared. "Same old," Mr. 2 said. He was observing his surroundings, wary of possible surprise attacks. Suddenly he heard the sound of the air being torn apart for a while. I felt a burst of force tearing the air above my head. Above. Mr. 2 quickly kicked his legs upward. I saw Zaros kicking down with both feet above his head. Zaros' own weight and strength, together with his legs, are comparable to heavy artillery shells shot down from the top of his head. Even if Mr. 2 kicked him violently with one foot, he couldn't resist it. Under this huge force, Mr. 2 quickly used the flexibility of his body to quickly avoid it. The ground where it was just now was shattered by Zaros like a heavy artillery shell. Boom! The surrounding streets were littered with broken stones flying. Zaros stood on the street and looked at Mr. 2 who was hiding far away. A smile finally appeared on his face. "Asshole shemale, aren't you invincible?" After Zaros sees that he can now put pressure on Mr. 2, the hope of victory may be on his side again. The attack just now was that Zaros used the moon step to fly his body into the air, and then launched an attack from above with a combination of weight and strength. Mr. 2 looked at Zaros and said, "Aren't you very strong? I didn't expect that the world government, which has always been like trash, would actually train agents like you with real abilities." Zaros looked at the world government pattern on his white shirt with some pride. "We are justice. The will of the world government is not something you capable criminals can compete with." Zaros' tone became a little proud and preachy. "Most of the agents of the CP department are selected by the intelligence personnel of the world government since childhood, and then trained strictly, passing on the justice of walking in the darkness from generation to generation." They sneered at pirates, criminals, local forces, and even the Revolutionary Army. World government is justice. Even using dark means to defend is also possible. "What a disgusting preaching," Mr. 2 said sarcastically. Mr. 2 hates the self-preaching look of people like Zaros the most. He has a maverick personality and hates people who flaunt justice. Ballet boxing. Whirlwind sweep. Mr. 2 supports the ground with one right leg, and the left leg is parallel to the ground and begins to rotate degrees. At this time, Mr. 2 really looked like a spinning ballet dancer. It's also like a top. Don't look like she is dancing ballet, but the strength and speed of her legs are simply amazing. When Mr. 2 approached further, Zaros' body did not move away this time. "Do you think your punches and kicks can scare me?" Zaros said. "Then you should give it a try," Mr. 2 said. At the same time, his body kept getting closer to Zaros. Zaros stood upright, his body standing on the ground like a statue. Iron block. Zaros used the most defensive ability of one of the 6 styles. He injected strength into his well-trained body in an instant, making his body extremely hard. Mr. 2's foot also wanted to hit Zaros. The distance between the two sides is only a few centimeters. Clang. Mr. 2's spinning right leg kicked Zaros hard in the body. But Mr. 2 felt as if a big iron block had been kicked into his right leg. Zaros only trembled slightly. "Ah, it hurts the slave family to death." Mr. 2 screamed in pain. Mr. 2 was in pain and quickly distanced himself. Mr. 2's face was in pain and his expression was extremely ferocious. His tears were all washed away by some of his heavy makeup. "My feet are all swollen." Mr. 2 looked at his right foot distressedly. As a ballet dancer, Mr. 2 takes great care of his feet and legs. The script just now used great strength, and hitting the opponent's body was like hitting iron. While Mr. 2 was checking the wound on his right foot, Zarosli was already in front of him with a shaved punch. Boom! Mr. 2 was caught off guard and was hit in the head by his opponent's punch. His whole body flew out. It stopped after rolling down more than 10 meters. Mr. 2 regained his footing. He looked at Zaros, puzzled in his heart. "Asshole agent, what's going on with you? Are you wearing some iron protective gear?" Mr. 2 asked. Zaros looked at Mr. 2 and said, "Really? Then you can attack me again. You can attack my whole body." Mr. 2 was also observing Zaros, but the other party didn't know what the conspiracy was. However, Mr. 2, who came back to his senses, is now very alert. Long-term practice of ballet and boxing has made his body extremely flexible and flexible. Even if you are counterattacked by the opponent, you can retreat as quickly as possible. Okay, the slave is here. Mr. 2 quickly charged. He quickly rushed to the front of Zaros. Iron Block. Zaros used the Iron Block ability again. Shemale boxing. Fists, wind, kicks and rain. Mr. 2's fists and kicks hit Zaros, who was standing still, like a violent storm. Dang 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 dang. Mr. 2's fists and kicks were like hitting a big iron block. Zaros remained unharmed. Kill. Mr. 2 hit Zaros on the head with his angry fists and kicks. After the vitals were attacked, Zaros still didn't change his face. He is almost like a statue made of iron now. For it. After Mr. 2 continuously attacked hundreds of punches and kicks, he finally felt tired and somersaulted more than 10 meters away. Mr. 2 breathed heavily and looked at Zaros. How could this happen? Mr. 2 felt puzzled. The opponent's body was as hard as iron. If the opponent is wearing iron protective gear, it will be useless for the man to attack the opponent's face. This is completely impossible. But Mr. 2 thought about Mr. 1. Look, you are a devil fruit user, Mr. 2 said in sudden realization. Zaros lifted the iron block and said disdainfully, I have never eaten a devil fruit before. Mr. 2 continued to ask very strangely, then how did you become so indestructible? Zaros said, I just used one of the 6 iron blocks. This is a powerful skill that can only be mastered through years of hard training. Not to mention the devil fruit, I have no protective gear in my clothes. Of course, there are other things in CP3. There are some agents who wear iron protective gear under their clothes. But that's them. What I use is the ability to inject strength into the body that has been trained hard for many years, iron blocks. After using the iron blocks, my body becomes like iron, just as hard. So when you attack me, you attack iron. Mr. 2 seemed to understand and said, you can get it by exercising with 6 types of iron blocks. However, there are so many strange things in this world that there are simply too many people to count. Mr. 2 looked at Zaros and said, anyway, you can make your body as hard as iron. And when I fought with those fellow agents of yours just now, I felt that their strength was obviously not as good as yours. You still have more skills. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 286. After a battle, Mr. 2 has realized that Zaros in front of him has extraordinary abilities. It can even be concluded that he is the most powerful among this group of agents. Zaros looked at Mr. 2 and said in an appreciative tone, although you are a weird criminal. But I want to praise your vision. Indeed, I am the best among CP3 agents. I have already mastered 4 of the 6 moves. All of them can be learned. My companions have only learned 3. And they are the 5 except me. Some of the other agents have not learned even 1 and can only be ordinary intelligence officers. Zaros is the number 1 master of CP3, and the 6 people who besieged Mr. 2 tonight are all the most advanced CP3 fighters. Although the other 5 are not as powerful as Zaros, they have also learned 3 of the 6 moves. Zaros looked at Mr. 2 and said, okay, now you don't have to talk nonsense. I can find a way to let you taste my iron fist. Zaros clenched his fists and hammered each other in front of his chest. Iron block. Zaros made partial iron blocks on both fists and forearms. Then he stamped his feet quickly on the ground. In less than a second, the ground collapsed dozens of times. Zaros' body quickly disappeared and then appeared in front of Mr. 2. Iron fist. Zero's right fist hit Mr. 2 hard. Mr. 2 avoided the attack with flexibility. Zero's right fist hit the ground like a hammer, smashing the masonry and flying across it, and a hole was smashed out on the ground. Clang clang clang. Zero's punched Mr. 2 like a giant hammer. But Mr. 2 nimbly dodged them all. Although Mr. 2 no longer attacks, all his energy is devoted to dodging, and he is still very flexible. That's awesome, big guy. But Nujia is an ace ballet dancer. Her body is so flexible that fighting you is like dancing in a ballet. Mr. 2 couldn't help but take the opportunity to mock Zeros. Zeros waved his fist more violently. Mr. 2 also felt a headache while constantly avoiding. Although he looks cynical on the surface. But Mr. 2 has been thinking about how to fight back. However, with Zero's attack, Mr. 2 saw some problems. From time to time, the muscles on Zero's fierce face would twitch. This is caused by excessive physical exertion during combat. Mr. 2 still keeps avoiding. When Zero's punched empty again, Mr. 2 jumped up suddenly. Shemale boxing technique. Shemale sword. But this time it was erected and cut down. Mr. 2's leg hit Zero's hard on the head. All of a sudden, Zero's was beaten to the ground. Really? Mr. 2 fell to the ground spinning like a ballet dancer. He looked at Zero's, who stood up again, and said, "Let me ask you, which iron piece of yours can make the body as hard as iron? But is it only when the whole body is motionless that the whole body can be made of iron? It is equally hard or can only keep part of the body hard when moving. Your fist is as hard as iron now, isn't it?" Zeros looked at Mr. 2 and waved his fist again. "You're right. Indeed, my body can only make my fists as hard as iron when my body is moving now," Zeros said. The strong man then began to step on the ground with both feet. "I still have stronger attacks." Zero's body quickly became flying. After jumping about 10 meters into the air, his feet moved again. The resulting force tore through the air, and he flew higher up again. Then Zeros began to fly in the air in an irregular direction. Only the sound of tearing the air remained. Mr. 2 looked at Zeros flying above. "This is one of your 6 postures that looks pretty good," Mr. 2 said with some admiration. Zeros said while flying in the air, "This is the moon step." Lunar steps are an extension of the shaved base. Moon step users can walk on the stairs even in the air. Zeros is now able to use his speed and air superiority to launch attacks at any time above the Mr. 2. Air fist. Zeros suddenly hit Mr. 2. The power of this kind of flight coupled with an iron fist is amazing. Mr. 2 also hurriedly avoided. Dang, Zero's aerial iron fist hit the position where Mr. 2 was just now. The ground was hit with potholes that can only be blown out by shells. But Zeros didn't stay here, and if he missed the attack, he quickly flew into the air again with the moon step. Facing Zero's powerful attack, Mr. 2 first evaded it, while constantly jumping and dancing to disrupt the opponent's attacks. Zeros launched 4 more aerial iron fist attacks, but was dodged by Mr. 2 in time. It's really amazing. Such flexible skills. Zeros also praised his opponent when he finally landed. Long-term monthly walking is extremely exhausting to the body. A strong man like Zeros also needs to take a break and act again. At this time, Mr. 2 made another move. He took off the 2 swan head ornaments on the back of the pink coat and put them on the toes respectively. Zeros looked at Mr. 2's strange behavior. Of course he wouldn't know what a formidable weapon those 2 swan head ornaments would be. "Asshole agent, your death has come." Mr. 2 ran over quickly. Iron block. Zeros was also tired, so he simply used an iron block to resist. Zero's body remained motionless, and his whole body turned into a block of iron again. Shemale boxing and toe kicks. Mr. 2 kicked with the toe of his right foot. Zeros, who had already turned into a block of iron, looked at the attacking kick with a blank face. Suddenly, The swan's head at the tip of Mr. Two's right toe stretched straight forward as if it was alive. Zaros was shocked, but he soon felt a pain in his chest. And it was excruciating pain. The swan's mouth pierced his chest like a spear of steel. What? Zaros rolled out in pain. Mr. Two retracted his right foot, and the swan head ornament on the top of his right foot announced the good news to him like a pet seeing its owner. Mr. Two said happily, "Good boy, don't act like a baby like this. He doesn't know that your mouth is as sharp as steel. Zaro's body is also the hardness of iron in its iron state. But if you encounter steel, or sharp steel, you will definitely be pierced." Zaros, who was knocked down, got up again in amazement. How could this happen?" Zaros said in disbelief. Mr. Two has already rushed in front of him. Toe kick. Mr. Two switched to attacking with his left leg this time. The swan head ornament on the toes straightened again, and the mouth as hard as steel pierced out again. Shaving Zaros evaded this attack in an emergency. He only avoided 6 meters this time because of a chest injury. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 287. Mr. Two quickly rushed over again. Toe kick. Mr. Two kicked again with his right foot. The swan head ornament at the tip of the toe is straightened out again. It stabs like a spear. Zaros hurriedly blocked the front with his arms. Iron block. Zaros's arm became partially iron block, as hard as iron. But Mr. Two's swan mouth was like a steel spear, piercing his arm. Zaros was in severe pain for a while, and he quickly took the opportunity to evade with the razor again. Moon step. Zaros deployed his moon steps with all his strength. With the tearing sound of the air, Zaros walked to the top of a nearby 3-story building after several months of walking. Zaros flew to the top of the 3-story building. He breathed heavily and looked at Mr. Two on the ground. He was even on the offensive just a few minutes ago. Mr. Two looked at Zaros, who was hiding on the roof of the building. "Do you really think you can escape my attack like this?" Mr. Two said confidently. Mr. Two's body jumped up suddenly after gaining momentum. Zaros is now afraid of being beaten, so he hastened to continue using moon steps to dodge. I saw Mr. Two leap into the air and dance in the night sky like a ballet dancer flying in the air. Ballet boxing. Swan Lake. Mr. Two dances like a swan in the night sky. It actually produced a temporary volley effect just like Uebu. Although it is an attack move, the volley dance is very beautiful. Moon step. Zaros quickly dodges. But Mr. Two approached him like a dance. In the night sky, Mr. Two's legs kicked out. Zaros is completely defenseless. Boom. There was a loud noise, and Zaros flew out. Zaros' body hit a house next to the street heavily. The whole person pierced through the house and hit the ground on the first floor. Mr. Two slowly fell to the ground like a graceful swan. "What a beautiful dance," Mr. Two said narcissistically. What he just performed is one of the moves that makes Mr. Two proudest. And in terms of aesthetics alone, this is the most beautiful move. After being immersed in his own narcissism for some time, Mr. Two recovered again. Oops, Ms. Merry Christmas and Mr. Four don't know what's going on over there. Mr. Two quickly ran away. Although Ms. Merry Christmas, the streets they walked may be a little different, but the final direction must be to rush out from the destroyed city wall in the south of Aruba, and then to the abandoned town in the southeast of Aruba. As long as he follows this direction, he may be able to catch up with MS in time. Merry Christmas. Hurry up, hurry up. Everyone needs slaves. Mr. Two started running quickly. On the streets where peace had been restored, more than a dozen figures walked over. The figures are all dressed in black suits. Their clothes all bear the symbol of the world government. More than a dozen figures rushed to the place where Zaros and the others fought. Here, a CP3 agent wearing a black suit like them lay lying on the street. They stopped when they saw the body. One of the figures stepped forward. Under the lights of some surrounding buildings, and under the stars. His face was illuminated. This is a tall, thin, blonde, middle-aged man with a beautiful and slender beard. It is CP3 Officer Phlox. Phlox looked at the corpse and said unhappily, "Check him." Two agents quickly reached the body and turned it onto its back. And checked. A bullet hole was found in the chest of the body, which had been fired from the front. The two agents got up and reported to Fox, "Sir, it's Kalaman. He's dead. He died about an hour ago." Phlox nodded, but his face was sad. It was an hour ago that Zaros communicated with him on the phone bug just now. That's when Zaros said he discovered the tail end of Baroque Studio. However, the death of this agent now shows that the opponent is very strong and fought fiercely. Just now, I have been using the phone bug to continue trying to communicate, but after the beginning, there is no audio. What Phlox is most worried about is that if the opponent is the elite combat force of Baroque Studio, then 6 of CP3's most elite agents, including Zaros, may be in danger. You must know that Zaros and the others are the most elite combat force in CP3. If Zaros and the others were killed in battle, then CP3 would be nothing more than a waste that is not worthy of supporting other CP organizations. However, it is not yet possible to fully confirm these things. Fox knelt down again to examine the corpse himself. After he inspected the body of the agent killed by the sniper. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, what Phlox is most worried about is that Crocodile will go out in person. In that case, even a CP3 wouldn't be enough for him to fight. And this body was killed by firearms. If Crocodile made a move, the corpse would be sucked dry into a mummified body. Phlox stood up again and stroked his long, graceful beard with his hand. "Okay, now you all have to look for our personnel," said Fox. "Yes." These CP3 agents quickly looked for Zaros and the others. On the first floor of the house that Zaros fell into before. The phone bug on Zaros kept ringing. Ring ring ring. Zaros fell here just after being defeated by Mr. 2 and was lying on the ground on this level. He was covered in wounds, his chest and arms were still red with blood. Zaros, who was in a coma, was awakened by the ringing of the phone bug. "This is..." Zaros regained consciousness and began to sit up hard. He endured the severe pain in his chest and arms, and barely sat up. Zaros took the blood-stained phone bug out of his clothes. "Hey!" Zaros said. "Zaros, it's us. Now Chief Phlox personally leads our support." "Where are you?" said the other side. Zaros endured the pain and continued to communicate, "I am in a house." "Ah." The person on the other side also heard that Zaros had been seriously injured. "Zaros, are you injured?" "Let's go find you," the other side said. The brash character in Zaros's bones made him hold on. "I'm going out now," Zaros said, he even stood up with pain. Zaros broke through the door of this house and went outside. Outside, Zaros struggled to walk on the street. CP3 agents searching the streets saw a staggering Zaros. "Zaros." They quickly approached Zaros. But when they approached, they saw that Zaros was now very embarrassed, with blood all over his body. His face was also bruised and swollen. It seemed that he had been seriously injured. They hurriedly helped Zaros, but Zaros couldn't continue to be brave. The wounds on his chest and arms were bleeding like a fountain. Several agents first took out emergency medicine and gave it to Zaros, and then used portable bandages to help bandage his wounds. After getting better, help Zaros go to Forox.